Hey, good morning, everyone, here in the U.S. or other parts of the country. And for those of you that are watching in the evening, welcome as well. I'm Storm331, back to doing some more streaming, and today we're going to be, as promised, covering my second half of my tips and advice for Final Fantasy VI. This time we're going to be covering the World of Ruin. Once we get through the intro and go in, we're going to go to one of our complete save files so we can properly access the one of our files. Anyway, I want to give a quick apology real quick because let's just say the other day I had plans to do the Peacekeepers / Russian Beat speedruns, and no sooner did I get home, I had to help a relative who fell. So we had to go over there and help him get him back up, and then we stayed for a while, and then we pretty much got home. By the time I got home, it was past my time for streams, so I made the right call making the decision not to do any streaming that day. But unfortunately, this was not by choice, by the way. But then again, my family member in question was in massive need. I'm not going to go anywhere further into that, of course, but anyway, I'm trying to figure out who we should bring. Well, let's give Umaro some exposure. So anyway, I hope everyone's making full use of the tips and tricks for World of Balance. Of course, there was one part I did forget to mention before we do any tips and advice for the World of Ruin, and that is to go over near the end of World of Balance, and that's of course the Floating Continent. And it actually involves one of the characters we have in our party, and that of course being Shadow. Shadow here is only playable in World of Ruin, assuming if you do not abandon him on the Floating Continent. This actually does affect your overall ability to... well, it doesn't really affect the gameplay that much. It does mean you won't have access to throw, or in general, you won't have access to another party member with unique moveset and among other things. So you do get to save a bit of training time in regards if you don't have Shadow on board, but at the same time, Shadow's a pretty powerful party member to have access to, not to mention, well, decent stats and everything. So if you want my honest opinion, I would strongly recommend always getting Shadow to bring with you for the World of Ruin. And that's because Shadow's a pretty awesome fighter in general. Not to mention the throw command is just insanely busted. But anyway, if you're wondering as to how you can get Shadow, when you usually leave the Floating Continent, you're trying to race over to the end so you can jump back on the Blackjack. But instead of jumping, you're going to want to wait. Now, it does have a set time as long as you don't do anything. Shadow will appear at the end, near tail end of 5 seconds remaining. So once 5 seconds reaches the clock of that timer, the timer will disappear and Shadow appears, as long as you don't move. So make sure you do not move, and you'll be able to get Shadow on board to come with you for the World of Ruin. Of course, if you do decide to leave him to die, though, this also affects how you get Realm, because Realm cannot be recruited normally unless you go get her from the Cave of the Veldt first. So that means if you lose Shadow, you're going to have to straight up go get Realm from the Cave of Veldt first, then you can go to Jajord and complete the side quest there to get her on board. So basically that's one of the tidbits about getting Shadow and making sure he stays alive for the World of Balance. And trust me, you will never, ever, ever again have to worry about losing Shadow as long as you do not choose not to have him on board. Now, believe it or not, in the past versions of Final Fantasy VI, they did not add this debris, so that's actually something brand new, actually. Oh wow, you can actually easily loop back up to the house. So anyway, for one thing I want to go over before we go over the rest of the tips and tricks is that with the World of Ruin, it's kind of the polar opposite of World of Balance. Whereas World of Balance, you're basically dealing with story, plot advancement, recruiting all 12 of your main characters. And it's pretty easy when you're in most battles, except for a few boss battles. But World of Ruin is kind of the opposite. It's like the developers are saying, congratulations, you completed the vast majority of the story. Here's the end of the game and all the side quests and the most difficult monsters you get to fight throughout the entire game. Enjoy. And that's pretty much one of the things you'll be dealing with in World of Ruin. And that's because most of the monsters are extremely more difficult than your typical monsters you fight in World of Balance. Which is why one of my tips and advice for World of Balance is to your main goal is to pretty much encounter every monster in World of Balance, because you won't get to encounter them again here in World of Ruin, because all of them get replaced with more stronger monsters. But of course, we're stuck on the solitary island the moment we get back to getting control in the World of Ruin. And of course, we start off with Celeste, of course. When you get control, of course, Sid is going to be pretty much ill and pretty much near death. As you can see, I saved him, of course, but unfortunately, he will. It is not as easy as it appears to save Sid. Of course, most speedrunners will usually let Sid die, unless there's a donation incentive to ensure that he stays alive, for the most part. But technically, saving Sid is a lot more difficult than letting him die, unfortunately, which is kind of sad. But if you do not want to see the scenes that follow after his death, you want to definitely prioritize saving him at all times. But at the same time, the game will just say, we're not going to let you have the fish to heal Sid. So sometimes the game will let you save Sid, and then there's just other times you just get really rotten bad luck. Trying to keep Sid alive. Unfortunately, keeping Sid alive doesn't really add anything brand new to the content, other than the fact you just saved him and he basically lives. But anyway, my tip for here is you want to pick up the yummy fish as much as possible. That is the best fish to heal. Now, in this version of the Pixel Remaster, the poison fish will be near the shore at the bottom left here. Whereas the upper right will always have the yummy fish. The yummy fish is the one you want to heal Sid the most. The rotten fish will always be right around this area. Now, of course, just the fish also helps heal Sid, but not as much as the yummy fish. Whereas the fish is probably right over here. Now, I'm not certain, but I do know that if you want to keep Sid alive, the yummy fish will always be the fast-moving fish, and it's always positioned on the upper right shore. Whereas the rotten fish will always be at the bottom left shore right here. So basically, you just gotta hope the game allows you to save Sid, or if you're trying to fast forward, get out of there, let Sid die or whatever, you can just give him the rotten fish until he dies. But technically, when you start off trying to feed Sid, his dialogue changes. The dialogue he starts off with indicates he's pretty much close to death, unfortunately. So yeah, you got a lot of work to cover when you're trying to save Sid, which is very unfortunate. But technically, it is possible to save Sid. It's just you got a lot of work ahead of you. So anyway, that completes my first tip for trying to save Sid. It doesn't really matter if you save Sid or let him die. It just doesn't really affect the story other than what happens afterwards. Now, of course, once you get the raft and finally land near Albrook, one of the things you want to be doing right off the gate is you'll stop by Albrook to learn the state of the world, and then you'll encounter two NPCs that will give you some clues as to where Sabin is. Now, Sabin's our only optional character we can get right around the time we get out of the solitary island. And I would strongly recommend recruiting Sabin at all times. Now, the game only requires you to have Celeste, Edgar, and Cesar to beat the game. Of course, getting all the other party members definitely does help, because you do need at least 12 party members to properly fight Kefka at full force. But getting Sabin pretty early is definitely a heaven sent, because Sabin will definitely help you give you some more added firepower as well as to improve your survivability. Because you can do this with Celeste alone, but it is going to be much harder for her. And if you're not very confident in dealing with all the monsters with her, you'll definitely want another party member immediately. And luckily, the game is very kind of them to give Sabin right off the gate. So Sabin's one of the more earlier party members we do get in Final Fantasy VI. He's the third party member we recruit right after the events of Mount Colts. And then, of course, he'll be, if you do decide to get him as your first optional character back, he will be the first party member we get back. So, in other words, it's always recommended, in my personal advice, get him immediately. Get him immediately, and you will have a more easier time. Because Sabin will get access to Fan Rush once the Falcon becomes available. So make a beeline for Duncan's cabin to the northeast of Narsh, and you find the 5 trees, go into the center, try to go to the house, watch the scene, and you'll get Sabin's Ultimate Blitz, because Fan Rush is going to be your go-to high damage dealer for most bosses in World of Ruin if you decide to use him throughout the entire playthrough. And I can attest to that because he is just almighty. But anyway, my next advice is always get Sabin on board. So anyway, once you get start getting the Falcon, if you do decide to get the growth egg, you'll get the Zarnarian gown. My next tip I would advise is that you want to go to the Dragon X Coliseum. This is actually where you can get some of the game's best items and gear in the entire game. But of course you have to wager for them, because you have to wager either your best weapons, best armor, relics, etc. just to get them. So of course, all these battles are random. So if you're like me and taught most of your party members spells, that could be a big problem in general, because the computer will have a massive, huge option. Sabin winds up becoming more of a liability once he gets access to Soul Spiral. So once he learns that, you'll definitely do not want him taking part in the Coliseum fights. But technically, if you want to get Shadow to be an evasion tank, he can definitely make full use of that. He can evade most of the attacks if you can maximize his evasion with any equipment, relics, etc. Of course, Umara is also very good for this, because he doesn't have as much spells as most of the other party members. He can just, if you give him Rage Rings, Blizzard Orb, or whatnot, he can definitely get a high pile up a large amount of damage pretty quickly. He can dominate most fights in the arena. But not all of them, of course. But of course, you definitely want to save. Of course, once you get the Sarinian gown, you definitely want to wager that and try to get the Maneuver Bustier. Now, there is, you can get a free one at Kefka's Tower if you decide to go there earlier and get that. That's actually Terra and Celeste's best armors, because that will have or negate all 8 elements. Some of them will get negated, whereas others will be halved. But technically, I would strongly recommend going online to find out what you can get for the prizes. But definitely save before you do this, because if your party member you choose fails to win the fight, you lose that item. So it's always important to save, because I've lost numerous battles against Outsider because he'll counterattack just about everything with Dispatch, and he can also hit you pretty high with Fuma Shurikens, and Pinwheels. So it is very difficult to do at level 31 or lower. And that can be a big problem, because you can definitely get Mog and Gal's best armors with Snow Mufflers, which gives them the ability to absorb ice and become flat-out physical tanks. So anyway, my advice for once you do get the Falcon after you complete Daryl's Tomb, you'll be able to take on all the side quests and start looking for the party members. So basically, the game will automatically put you on path for to get Cyan back when you go to Miranda, and then you go to Zozo Mount Zozo to pick him up. And then he'll give you your next party member, which is Gal, who is all the way over at the Veld. And then you can go into the Cave of Veld and get either Shadow or Realm, depending if you chose to save or not save Shadow at all. And from there, the game really makes you try to have you go search for the other party members. So my advice is, when you do start getting party members back, I would rather prioritize getting party members that did not have as much screen time on World of Balance as opposed to those that did. Now, of course, Shadow is among those characters, so you can definitely go the intended route to get Cyan and Gao back, as well as get Shadow. Of course, you definitely do want to get Realm and Strago back because they had very little time. Of course, Mog didn't really have as much long time. And technically what I do nowadays is that I get Mog first because not only do I get Mog, but I also get Omaru out of the way too. And that's because when you get both of those characters, you get Val Granda Esper as well as Midgar Esper as well. My apologies if I don't say the names correctly. But for the most part, you'll definitely get two powerful Espers, one of which you can start learning the Blizzaga, Faraga, and Thundaga spells as early as possible. Getting access to those spells is going to be heaven sent in the long haul, because all 12 of your main party members are going to want to have access to those spells. And of course, you can pick up Realm at your door, which is right around here. Strago can be found in the Fanatsy Tower, which is right here, and you'll need Realm before you can recruit him. Terra, of course, is residing in Mobliz. You would have to go in and out of Mobliz twice to get Terra. My advice for that one / tip is that when you get Saban back, go straight to Mobliz before you go to Nikia to advance the main story. Because if you do all the first part of the events at Mobliz, once you get the access to the Falcon and get more party members, you can come straight over here and get Terra and do the second part, but you definitely want to have 4 more party members because unfortunately, Humbaba will use his Bababa breath to blow away 2 of your random party members at random, so you do want to make sure you want to have some additional party members on hand so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket, so to say. Locke, of course, can be found in the Phoenix Cave. In my opinion, he's probably going to be the last party member you get because he had the longest stay time for World of Balance in comparison to the other characters. But you do need 8 party members before you can tackle this area. Or you can just simply turn off encounters if you're playing the Pixel Remaster version. But you can get Locke early if you want to get access to Ultima through Ragnarok. But I would strongly advise saving Locke for last out of the main 12 party members because unfortunately he had the largest amount of screen time. Now, of course, you'll get Edgar and Zetzer automatically through the main story. Of course. And of course, we get Saban as our last optional character, and he is recruited right after we get to Albrook, of course. Now, of course, you definitely do want to pick up other Espers. My next tip, once you get to the Falcon, go back to the Solitary Island, go check the shores where you fish for Sid, and you'll get the Quetzalcoatl Esper next. Of course, Death Gaze also has the Bahamut Esper. You'll get that upon defeating him, but that's going to require multiple battles because you will not defeat him in one setting unless you're insanely lucky. And you'll definitely want to make sure none of your party members are at level 5 because he will start off the fight with instant death attacks. And of course, you'll get Alexander by over here on Domo Castle by completing Science side quest. You'll definitely need him to trigger that. But I would strongly recommend getting most of your party members before you do that and learn the more advanced spells. That's also very important. Of course, Strago can pick up one of his best lures, Grand Delta, once you get him and Realm back on your team. You would have to go to Thamasa, and then Abbott's Rock will become available. So once you encounter Hydon, destroy his Hydonites first, and then he'll perform Grandola. Then after that, win the battle. Of course, you can also steal the Thornlet off of him, but just be forewarned, it's a very rare steal. Now, every now and then, if you return to Thamasa and spend some time after that fight, there might be a chance that Hydon can make a return. And of course, you can definitely tell if he's back if you speak with Gon Ho. I don't know if that happens in this version or not, but I do know in past versions it is possible to refight Hydon. Have a refight just in case you did not get Grand Delta. But just be forewarned, if you're going for the Thornlet and Wagerit for the Mirage Vest, you're going to be in for a pretty huge struggle for the most part. All right, so that covers in terms of what you can get first. There is no right or wrong way to do what you do for these side quests. You definitely want to tackle them the moment you get your party members. Of course, I should remind players to be extremely careful when they go get Go-Go at Triangle Island, because once you go into the belly of the Zone Eater, the enemies are going to be insanely strong. So if you do want to level up your characters, I would strongly recommend waiting until you get your other 12 party members. Keep in mind, Go-Go will always be at least 2 levels higher than your current party. Now, my next tip, of course, is that once you get all your party members back, and I would strongly recommend not leveling up your team until then, is to take full advantage of Narsh's monster repopulation and fight until you get start leveling up your party members to higher levels. In fact, this is actually one of the best places to do a solo grind for your characters. So, well, how in the world can you do that? Well, it's because, one, we have access to this right here. Now, the Adventures School, as mentioned in my previous tips and advice, is basically allows us to learn the ways of the game in the beginning. Of course, by the time you get into World of Ruin, this becomes more of a mere afterthought. But of course, they were kind enough to give us a free bucket of healing water. So basically, when you're there's not monsters all over Narsh. Basically, when you do a lone party member, they get a massive amount more experience than they do when you're fighting solo with an entire team. So basically, if you have the growth egg, you equip that on your party member, cast Vanish on your party member, that said party member, and just win your fights. Now, Test Riders are the only huge threat you want to be extremely wary about, because they can use Flash Raid. But most of the enemies here near the town use physical attacks, and you can cast Vanish to avoid being hit. This can also work in fighting the monsters in the Imperial Lands of World Balance, as well as the Esper Cave, because they don't really use magic. Hang on one second. Sorry about that. But anyway, this is also another noble area because you don't have to worry about status element attacks as much as possible. And this is like one of the few areas that enemies don't really use magic as quite often. I mean, the enemies in the caves do give off plenty of magic attacks in those, but this is actually one of the more safer areas for a solo grind. So if you want to train your party members one by one so they can always get their Esper bonuses, or if you don't have all the Espers for stat bonuses to be evenly distributed among the party, the next best option, probably the next safer option, or as closest to being safe, is to always go to Miranda Desert. Now, Miranda Desert is very famous for magic training because Cactors always give you 10 AP upon being defeated, but they have very high evasion. So you always want to have access to party members with skills or attacks that always land, regardless if they don't have the sniper sighting or not. And of course, there is one other enemy that resides in the desert that appears more frequently, and those are slagworms. So basically, slagworms, when they're defeated with an entire party, they give you about at least 1,991 XP, which is pretty huge. So basically, once you get access to this desert, right after you get the Falcon, this is actually a pretty dang good training ground for not only your spell gaining, because slagworms give you a pretty decent amount of AP, but this is also a pretty dang good area to level up your party members in mass, because you're going to get a lot more AP. It's a lot more safer because you can use death spells on slagworms, and they're one of the few enemies that are actually susceptible to instant death. So it's a good way to take full advantage of that and train mobile party members if you don't want to do the solo grind for at Narsh. Now, of course, this is probably the most popular area to train mobile party members. And in my opinion, probably the most dangerous out of all these is, of course, Dinosaur Forest. It's not technically a major dungeon or anything, but it's probably one of the most dangerous areas, because you'll fight Tyrannosauruses and on rare occasions, Brachiosauruses. Now, one thing I have discovered in this version of this game, the Pixel Remaster, it looks like Square Enix took the liberty to make sure that controlling or sketching these monsters is kind of almost next to impossible. Because I have tried to use Realm to take control of Brachiosauruses so we can steal ribbons off of it, but it is not possible, or at least as far as I know. But if you do know, please let me know in the YouTube comments, because this will be eventually be exported a little bit later. But of course, sketching Tyrannosauruses, their bite attack is like 8 times damage, but for some odd reason you cannot do that in this version. So this means Realm can't really use her own personal skills to take control of Brachiosauruses and can't sketch Tyrannosauruses either. One thing to keep in mind is that Tyrannosauruses are very dangerous enemies to fight, just as much as the Brachiosauruses. So once you get your party members up to level 70 or higher, it becomes a more better ideal to come over here to level up the rest of your team. Because once you get their HP gets to way higher levels than what they're currently at, as shown here, it makes it a little bit more easier to survive the Brachiosaurus attacks. It does have some pretty nasty ones, namely Ultima, Meteor. It can also use Whale, which also hits pretty high. And it can also use Disaster, which can straight up inflict status elements on your entire team. And it can even use a party-wide Snort as well. So fighting the Brachiosauruses requires some more bit of strategy and planning as opposed to the earlier versions. But you get plenty of experience here too. Now, if you're pretty bold of trying to get the ribbons off of the Brachiosauruses, that is a very good idea to do too. You also have a rare chance of winning Celestiards. And of course, you can actually steal a rare one from a very rare enemy in Phoenix Cave, but they're usually accompanied with Chaos Dragons, 2 of them. But it is worth a shot trying to get Celestiards. Those are actually very good relics to have, because that reduces your MP use by 1. So my next tip for, in general, when you play Final Fantasy VI World of Balance, make sure you have plenty of relics that negate various status elements. So, in World of Balance, you didn't see a whole lot of status elements being used. Here in World of Ruin, though, they use status elements a lot. Most common is mostly Poison, and Game Over status elements, mostly Petrify and Zombie, are almost always going to be the most topic of the day. Now, one thing to keep in mind, though, is that when you go into any dungeon in World of Ruin, is that just about every monster in that dungeon is going to use one specific status element. When you go to rescue the child in Tenzin, when you're trying to get Saman back on board, all the monsters, well, some of them only use Petrify for their attacks. So you would definitely need either the ribbon or the jewel ring to protect yourself. When you go to get Edgar back on your team, when you go through Figaro Cave and Figaro Castle, For those areas, you'll know that most of the monsters there use Confuse. So you would use basically peace rings or ribbons to protect your party. If you when you go to recruit Omaro at the Yeti Cave, all the monsters there, just about all of them, use attacks that inflict damage. So you need white cakes and them, and ribbons as well. Now, Mount Zozo doesn't really have as many stats inflicting enemies um, as most of the other dungeons, but in that dungeon, most of the enemies have the ability to avoid attacks. So basically, when that happens, it means you'll need sniper sightings in order to accurately hit your enemies, or use skills that guarantee hits. And of course, if you go to Daryl's Tomb to get the Falcon initially, you're going to be running into more monsters that use zombie attacks in addition to poison. And that's also the same thing with Emmett's Rock. Now, believe it or not, there's not many status attacks on when you go to Domo Castle's Dreamscape, as well as the underground castle when you travel through Figaro Castle. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be some of them that will inflict status elements. So it's always important to have as much status element protection as much as possible, because every dungeon you go into in World of Ruin is going to have specific status element attacks. The most common are going to be poison and zombie, but some of them, of course, will have access to poison and a variety of status element attacks. So you're going to want as much protection or coverage as much as possible for these things, because just about every dungeon in World of Ruin has a specific gimmick associated with that dungeon. It doesn't always have to be status elements. It could be some that misses, or they have high evasion, they have high certain stuff, or they're susceptible to instant death attacks or whatever. Now, my next tip, of course, is that once you get if you do decide to get Mog earlier, always get the Moglulu charm immediately once you get him back on board. So once you see the scene where Mog rejoins your party, you'll definitely want to search the area where he was standing at to get the Moglulu charm, and that eliminates all enemy encounters. Of course, in the Pixel Remaster, you can easily toggle off on and off the encounters. But if you want to be a traditionalist, having Magalulu's charm is a blessing, because that will help you get treasures pretty early without having to run away from battles. So that means once you get Mog on your team and you do decide to go to Kefka's Tower just for the purpose of picking off as much stuff as possible, it's about as far as you can go. You can definitely get an earlier Manivir Bustier as well as loaded dice here. You can easily take every treasure in the Fanatsy Tower without engaging enemies, as long as you don't engage the Holy Dragon first. And just make sure you do not pick up the Soul of Thamasa, because you'll have to fight Magi Master, and you'll be caught off guard and unprepared for that fight if you don't have Re-Rise already. But technically with Magalulu's charm, it's going to be very useful to eliminate the encounters. It's very good to go to some of these areas, pick up some items and gear that you would normally wait till later to pick up, for the most part. Now, what other tip I should advise players? But yeah, technically, when you're going through the side quest, you'll definitely find 8 dragons. And it's also very important to get the Crusader Esper, take on those dragons, and get Crusader as quickly as possible, because you, like Bahamut, you're going to probably want to use this Esper's stat gains to get everyone to 999 MP. And some party members will not be able to have the luxury of getting that on natural level ups. So that's very important, along with the Bahamut Esper. Luckily, you'll get that from Death Gaze. Just about all the side quests involving the Ancient Demons, Hamaba, Death Gaze, and the 8 Dragons will get you a guaranteed Esper once they've been beaten. So that's very important. Of course, Salmon, Cyan, and Strago all have side quests of their own that gives them some pretty strong techniques. You'll definitely want to get those out of the way as well. And I think I pretty much covered most of the tips and advice for World of Ruin. But if you did succeed in getting your all the world balances rages, just do the best you can to keep track of all the rages you pick up on World of Ruin, because the best time to get those rages is pretty much after you go through your the get access to Falcon, and you can come back and start learning those rages immediately. So try to get every rage out of the way. Um, if your ultimate goal is to get every rage, make sure you pick up all the rages you encounter um, up until the point of going to Daryl's tomb. That way, that makes it a lot more easier, because you can definitely get Land Ray and Peepers for White Wind and Mighty Guard respectively. You can also get Step Mine from Fafnir. You can also pick up Killer Mass for Middle Cutter. And of course, you can get some pretty powerful abilities. Now, one thing to keep in mind about the dungeons is that you'll have instant access to most of them, but there are two areas of note that you will that's going to serve as the one-time purpose only dungeons. Those being the Collapsing Mansion and Tenzin. There's only 3 enemies to encounter there, which is Scorpion, Zook, and Nightshade. Night Stalker. And then, of course, there's Cyan's Dreamscape. There are some monsters in the later area that will reappear in the Ancient Castle, but most of the monsters that you'll encounter while searching for your other party members and the 3 Dream Stooges, those will only make one-time appearances in that area, so make sure you encounter every last one of them. And, of course, the mine area has exclusive enemies, one of them being one of Gao's most powerful fire rages, being EO, having access to Flare Star, so be sure to encounter EO, Pluto Armor, and Schmidt as well. But overall, you'll be able to re-access most of the areas in the World of Ruin, but World of Ruin only has 2 areas where you only get one-time visits. But you can easily return to most of these areas and refight most of the monsters again. But anyway, that concludes my tips and advice for World of Ruin. Now, of course, again, be sure to check. You don't have to take this video as the go-to guide for tips and advice, but it's just my way of giving back to those that did help out people like me that basically had a hard time trying to figure out where the heck should I go, or what should I be doing? How did I get all this stuff or whatnot? But anyway, I just want to leave my tips and advice for those that do need it. And I hope everyone enjoys Final Fantasy VI. But anyway, that's going to conclude the stream. I will highlight this before I go to work. I'll probably export it tomorrow afterwards, but I will be working from 2 to 10 tomorrow. So today and tomorrow I will not be streaming. I have the entire weekend off. But the next 3 days after I get back to streaming, we're going to be focusing on speedruns. We'll be kicking that off with the Peacekeepers, because we're making up for not doing that the other day. We're also going to be making a return to TMNT arcade speedruns. It's been quite a while, but it's time to get some de-rusting out of the way for that. And we're also going to be returning to Joe and Mac SNES to get de-rusting out of the way and start getting back into that. So we're going to be doing a lot of de-rusting and playing for games to speedrun. I have tons of games to speedrun, and pretty much everyone's going to enjoy and love it if they do. But anyway, we got plenty of games. I'm a variety streamer for the most part. I play RPGs for a lot of things. I play casual games on a lot of things. There's going to be at least one game most people will love that I do play up on here. So hopefully you enjoy the content that I do. So feel free to sub to my Twitch and YouTube channels if you want. There's no rush or pressure. And I hope everyone enjoys and gets a full use out of any of the content that I produce. And there is also a lot of good players and speedrunners aside from myself that can do way better than I can. But I'm just a contributing in my own way. But anyway, that's going to conclude today's stream. I hope everyone has a very great Saturday day. Great Saturday. And I'll catch you all Monday. This is Storm 331 signing off. Have a great day. Take care, and I will